Saturday. Welcome, everyone, to Happy Hour with Fernway Collective. I am Randall, founder and president. Today we have Deb Maroulis here with us, YA author extraordinaire, teacher, professor, mythologist.
Sounds familiar.
We are laughing so profusely because we've tried to do this like 7 times, and I realized I didn't hit the go live button after several failed attempts with live messenger rooms and 25 minutes of searching for my glasses that I still have yet to find, and I live in a studio apartment. They can't be far. So here we are. We did it. We're here.
Just know that we sounded fantastic and really smart when we thought we were live and weren't. We were super on top of it.
We sounded so great.
Right? Yeah, so great.
Oh my gosh. I can't even believe this.
This is so funny.
So,
okay.
Tonight we're going to be talking about Demeter and Persephone. You may have heard her name as Demeter, and my personal stance is, which who cares about my personal opinion when we're talking about facts, right? But my personal stance is either one is correct because none of us are native ancient Greek speakers. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at.
And even then, I mean, words were fluid, right? So words are fluid.
Words
that
are
could be a
fluid.
whole
Yeah,
other
language is fluid. And it's arbitrary, right? We assign meaning to this collection of sounds.
That's right. And just in case any former students that I taught way early on in my career, when I was still like I'm classics and everything is the way it's supposed to be and use your grammar, just that never happened. we don't talk about that. So
who's the patron saint of lost things? Is it Saint Anthony?
I think so.
Uh-oh, bad Catholics over here.
I was gonna say Michael, but which one's? There's one of them's the travel guy.
It's Saint Anthony. My grandma would be proud of me for remembering, but also slightly horrified that I had to Google it and not sure of my memory. So maybe Saint Anthony will help me find my glasses.
Maybe, or just do a sacrifice to the fairies or something. Leave them some sugar or cream. Maybe that'll do it. Do you have cream?
Yeah. I might have some oatmeal.
That might be why they took your glasses.
Millennial life, California life.
Yeah.
I don't have any milk products in this house. What are you talking about?
What's that? Who drinks dairy? That's gross. Actually, to be fair, I don't drink it either. So, but it is in my house.
Oh well, there we go. All right.
Fairies.
So Deb's going to be telling us about Demeter and Persephone.
Demeter or Demeter, Persephone. I don't think I've ever heard Persephone's name pronounced differently.
Persephone.
Persephone. Oh yeah. Okay.
That's wrong. We're just going to go out and say that's flat out wrong.
That is flat out wrong. Yeah. Persephone, Demeter. Demeter and Zeus had a child, right? Persephone. And Demeter loved her. That's all she wanted, right? She was just like, give me my child, leave me alone. Kind of reminds me of my mom. I'm gonna go live out in my farm, just chill. And you're right. And so she was, and Persephone grew up that way. She loved it. She thought it was normal life. She would get lonely, right? And she'd go out with her friends, some nymphs or whatever. One day she was out picking flowers in a garden. She was going to bring her mom a bouquet because she was sweet like that. Oh. And she saw a flower at the edge of the field, I think Narcissus, not to be confused with the Narcissus of another myth that we know, just random coincidence that they're named the same thing. And she runs over, she's like, ooh, this is pretty, my mom's like this. And so she goes and picks the flower, and then the entire earth opens up, and here comes Hades riding out. And you've seen so many pictures, so many paintings of this moment, right? I think it's called the Rape of Persephone or the Kidnapping of Persephone, all kinds of fun names. And he takes her back down to the underworld and is like, you're my bride now, so this is the way it's going to be. And Demeter's kind of chilling at home, making dinner, like whatever, beans are getting a little cold. She's like, where is my daughter? And she never comes home. So she says, I'm going to go check. So she goes and asks Persephone's friends, the nymphs, hey, you guys went out to pick flowers. Where's Persephone? And they were like, yeah, she bailed like hours ago. We don't know where she is. We were, going to go down to the hot tub and chill. So she was like, okay, that's great, but I got to find my kid. So she starts looking, and then the more she looks, the scarier it gets. You've seen those moms running down the aisles at Target, right? Looking for their kid, right? And that's what Demeter is doing, except there was no Target, but same thing. And she's asking around. She can't find Persephone. So somebody's like, look, you really need to stop screaming. Why don't you go ask Apollo? He's literally in the sky all day. He probably saw what was happening. And so she's like, it's a really good idea. I should have thought of that. So she goes and asks Apollo. And Apollo was like, oh, yeah. Hades, checked her out and took her. And Demeter's like, no, that's not okay. That's my kid. And so she goes and tries to hold counsel with Zeus. And she's like, look, dude, we had a kid together. And now your brother has taken her. And he's like, yeah, pretty cool, huh? And she's like, no, it's not pretty cool. It's not cool at all. And he's like, well, there is a heat joke to play there with Hades, but I'll leave that. And and she gets really mad at Zeus, right? And she's like, dude, I want my kid back. He's like, yeah, see, kind of promised her to my brother as his wife. Thought it'd be kind of nice. She could live with the god. She could be like, one of the top 3. She could be the queen of Hades. And
let's
Demeter,
clarify for a minute that
Hades and hell.
No, well, no? That too, I guess, but
okay.
Incest wasn't really a concern.
Yeah, well, they're gods, and so there's no like, we're not going to mess with the DNA if there's incest. And brothers and sisters, and I mean, I'm literally studying this right now for my dissertation with the incestuous relationships. It wasn't the whole idea of sexual relationships and things like that is a completely different story. But we should totally touch on that at one point. But yeah, it wasn't considered incestual in the way we understand it today. Absolutely. So anyway, Demeter is like, give me my kid. And Zeus was like, no. And so she starts pouting, right? And she gets really angry. And we all know that Demeter is the goddess of the grain, right? An earth goddess. She's responsible for harvests and all those fun things. And so she wasn't feeling up to it. She wanted her daughter back. So she stopped gracing the wheat and the corn. And so all the crops started to die. And then
fun fact, in Roman mythology, Demeter's name is Ceres, Ceres, which is where we get our modern day word for cereal, because she was the goddess of the grain.
Of grain, right? Yeah, good. And so everything started dying. Nobody could eat. And when the gods don't have people to worship them, they become immaterial and they begin to fade, right? Just sort of like Tinkerbell with Peter Pan, right? We have to clap, right, to get her to become alive and have energy or whatever. So same thing with the gods, right? You have to give them credit, you have to say their name, you have to worship them in order for them to thrive. And with no people, now Zeus started getting worried. And there's this whole great other story about Demeter. She's going on the search for her daughter, and she runs into this old woman at a well, right? Because Demeter is very down and she's crying, and this old woman comes up to her and kind of dances and like does a striptease and talks to her about all of this, and just makes Demeter crack up, right? She thinks it's hilarious. So anyway, she ends up being a nanny, right, to this king and queen's child. And there's this story kind of gets mixed up in with a little bit of Egyptian mythology, right, with Isis and searching for her husband, and then he was made into that totem, right? Remember that? So there's all kinds of similarities in that story. I don't want to go too deep into that because we're talking strictly about Demeter and Persephone. We have a great professor of ours, Chris Downing. She always says you can't tell one myth without telling them all, and damn if that's not true.
Like a whole spider web.
Yeah,
Every
exactly. They're all
piece we tell
connected.
like moves all these ripple effect throughout.
Yeah. So, long story short, Demeter basically cuts the food supply off of the earth, and the gods are starting to get worried that they're not going to have anybody to worship them. So, Zeus calls Demeter back and was like, I'll talk to my brother. And she's like, okay. So, eventually, long story short, they work out a deal that Demeter can go back. I'm sorry, Persephone can go back to Demeter. And while Persephone's down with Hades, it's been a few months. It's been a while, right? It's been, I think, 6 months, a year, depending on which version you're listening to. And she probably got a
And the
little
girl gets
hungry.
hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Hades is like, hey, I just have these pomegranate seeds. Would you like some? And, there's all kinds of debate about this. And this is the part of the story that I love, love, love to talk about. Some stories say that she ate them not knowing the consequences, and other stories say that she full on ate them, knowing exactly what was going to happen. And we can talk about that. But for this purposes, she ate 6 of the seeds. And as she did that, she was leaving Hades and going back up to see her mom. And Hades was like, yeah, see, there's this rule. If you eat something while you're in Hades, you can never leave. And Demeter was like, yeah, but I can kill everyone and no one will worship you and then you'll die anyway. And he's like, we could work something out. So they did. They worked out because she ate 6 seeds. She had to stay in Hades 6 months out of the year, or half the year. And so she would stay there with Hades. And during those months, those are the months that Demeter, yeah.
You have
Yes,
a question.
yeah.
Wasn't our modern calendar that we're using, the Gregorian calendar, only had 12 months recently?
Recently, Rome actually contributed 2 of the months, right?
Right.
Yeah, July
July
and
and
August.
August.
Hmm.
But before that, on the Julian calendar was only 10 months.
Correct. Yeah. So you
So
could say 5 seeds, you could say 6 seeds. It
is
depends
this
on
our
who's
modern
telling it.
understanding of what half the
Hmm.
year looks like that we're getting this
Exactly.
number from?
Yeah. And that's when I'm teaching these myths, I tend to teach them in context to what we can understand today. And then I like to start picking them apart into how they might have been understood back then, right?
All right,
Because
I'll stop picking apart. I'll let you
no,
finish.
I'm glad that you're doing it because other people are too. There people are listening going, wait, well, actually,
Oh, wait a minute.
that's 12 months. Yeah. So, but no, that's true. So she ate enough seeds to keep her there for half the month. And, there's even some really interesting studies about how the 10-month or 9-month cycle, the cycle of a woman's pregnancy, right, is the same as the cycle of the earth. And there is that whole mythology of giving birth to the grain and having that harvest be the same sort of thing. So we could even look at that as far as Demeter's mysteries. And when was the Eleusinian mystery? Like, when was that gathering? Do you even know? I'm wondering if it was
The
around
Eleusinian
harvest time.
mysteries. I'm not 100%
It's a
sure.
mystery.
It's
It's
mysterious.
mysterious. We don't know all the answers. So long story short,
So
Persephone is reunited with her mom in the summer and spring months. And that's why we, according to this mythology, have our flowers and our harvest and all of that when Demeter is with her child. And then when she has to go back to Hades, Demeter's sad and everything dies.
everything dies.
Everything dies. Yeah.
Right. When when Persephone is with Demeter on Earth, summer's in full bloom, right? It's nice and
Yep.
warm, everything's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. And then as Persephone readies herself to leave and go back to Hades in the underworld, Demeter gets sad. All the
Mm-hmm.
crops start failing, right? That's why you have to gather your harvest in the fall before everything
Mm-hmm.
starts dying.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the dead of winter, the first
Mm-hmm.
season that Demeter is without Persephone. And then the springtime comes, all the new life starts blooming when Demeter is
Mm-hmm.
readying the earth for Persephone's return. And I think it's so beautiful, like on a big and a small scale, right? Like think about domestically how you ready your house for guests or the return of your loved ones or something like that. And Demeter's doing
Yeah.
it for the entire earth. And
Yeah.
This is a story that we classify as a pourquoi tale. And obviously, pourquoi means why or because in French, just like pourquoi in Spanish, functioning the same way. And they're stories that just explain how things came to be the way they are. You could argue that all science is a pourquoi story,
You could
right?
argue
Helping
it.
us make
Yeah.
sense of our world, giving us context into how things came to be the way they are now. And so the Demeter and Persephone story, what that's teaching us is why the seasons change and where that comes from. And it helps
Yeah.
us make meaning like all myths do.
Absolutely. And there is a death and rebirth involved in that as well. And in all of the mythologies, and even in, religions we see in the stories, there's a death in the winter to be reborn, right? And one of the things we can look at is in those old civilizations, they didn't have refrigerators, right? They didn't have ways to keep things fresh, so they buried it. And they like a cellar type situation. And then in the spring, when they needed things, they would dig that back up. It was a rebirth. They could plant again. So, which is kind of interesting. And so Demeter represents that as well.
You know who else like returns into the earth and then reemerges?
I wonder who.
Well, no. I mean, yes, Jesus, but I'm talking about
No.
vampires.
I was going to say vampires. I totally was going to say vampires. Hello, it's you.
Kind of like in a cave, right?
He wasn't in the ground. He was in a cave.
Right.
Which,
I mean,
again, womb,
in the
we could
earth, though,
go
I
on
would argue that a
too.
cave is in the bosom of the earth.
Well, sure. It's the uterus
Right,
of the
get
earth.
into that,
Just
Randall.
kidding. Yeah. Let's not do that one.
Okay. The uterus, not the bosom. Or that's fair.
That's fair.
But I have
vampires,
always really seen Persephone as this like queen of the vampires, queen of the dead. Like you were saying, some of the interpretations is that she willingly ate that fruit to have some sort of like agency in her life. Because in most of the stories about Demeter and Persephone, Hades and Demeter are arguing about Persephone's fate right in front of her, and she literally doesn't have a voice. She doesn't have a choice in her life. And so maybe her choosing to eat these pomegranate seeds was allowing her to have like autonomy and control over her life. And I love that interpretation. And if we want to think in like a depth psychological perspective with embracing our shadow self and embracing all of the things that society might find negative or wrong or bad or spooky scary, I feel like Persephone really, in making this choice, embraces the darkness within herself, allows herself to be queen of the underworld for half the year, and then be like the midsummer queen when she comes back to Earth, right? Where she's get you a girl that can do both. And so it's like she's such a mythological icon because she can do both and she can do both well. And Persephone and Hades is one of the only healthy marriages among gods in the Greek pantheon. And even though some could argue it started with an abduction or like a rape,
which
it's
those words are
really
synonymous
unclear
in antiquity, right? A rape doesn't necessarily mean a sexual assault. It means a kidnapping.
Or maybe Persephone was wandering around being like, Hades, where you at? My mom's asleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm home by myself. What are you doing?
See, Gen X. I did this.
Right. Oh.
Yeah.
I was texting. You up?
You're a millennial. Yeah. I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna get on my dial, my big rotary.
By the time I got old enough to do a booty call, we definitely had texting.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Persephone would be like, hey Hades, you up?
Same.
My mom's not here. Come grab me. Right?
Come grab me.
Come tearing into the driveway in your pickup truck.
Okay, Taylor.
I was thinking more Garth Brooks, but
sure, either one.
Ain't going down till the sun comes up. Ain't giving in till they get enough. Yeah.
There you go. I like it. Yeah. You know,
stories about Persephone and Hades. Who knew?
Right? Yeah. I mean, Garth knows what he's talking about. Seriously. That thing about you were talking about Persephone and renewal. Demeter does the same thing, right? She goes and bathes in a stream, or is it a stream, right? Where she renews her virginity. right? And
Mm.
virginity can
A
be,
made up social construct that has no
well,
meaning or value or weight.
yes, today's
I should
patriarchal
apply that.
construct. Yeah, I think, yeah, that was good. Good. Hey, that's in my new book too, by the way. That actually is an
Oh,
argument. Yeah, it's hilarious. The couple do the thing, and then he's like, "This is so sweet that we lost our virginity together." She's like, "You're an idiot. That's a patriarchal construct." It's great. And they get into a big
I
fight.
didn't lose shit.
Right. Well, that's the point. Is in another way to translate that word in ancient Greek is self-assured. So
Mm-hmm.
virginity doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean a sexual act either. It could be a woman's self-assurance. And it sort of makes sense, as if the woman is going to be married to a man, she's no longer self-assured. She's totally dependent upon him. And even if she was dependent upon her brother or dad, she still had that familial connection. Now she's entirely dependent on this man who can take her or leave her, set her aside, and all her dowry and everything is up for grabs. So it's a complicated language.
It's very, very complicated.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Um, so let's talk a little bit about Hades, because I feel like he's a god that gets a really bad rap, especially if you're a millennial and you grew up with Disney's Hercules,
Mm,
equating Hades with the Christian devil, right? There's this idea, especially in our Judeo Christian, that's a
mm-hmm,
problematic term,
mm-hmm.
in our patriarchal Abrahamic, let's say,
That's good.
understanding and like secular Abrahamic society, we tend to think of things, even if you're not Jewish or Christian or Muslim, like this is our secular culture, right? That our
Mm-hmm.
country is founded on, that there
Yeah.
is good and evil, that there's God and the devil. And so many people want to see Zeus as like the Christian God or the
Yeah.
Abrahamic God and Hades as the
Mm-hmm.
devil. And
Mm-hmm.
that's totally, totally not true. Like the only similarities Hades has with the devil is that they both live underground and they're both in charge of souls.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you look in a Christian context, God's in charge of souls too, right? But in the Greek understanding of the world, all souls went to the realm of Hades.
All
There,
souls, good,
there
bad,
wasn't
indifferent,
like,
everything.
yeah, it wasn't a reward and punishment system. And so
Mm-mm.
Hades isn't down there like doling out punishments. In his 9 circles of hell. Like that's just not
Mm-mm.
how it's going. He's
Yeah.
darkness, but he's not evil. So it gives the ability in this cultural context to be dark and not evil, to embrace your shadow, but
Yeah.
not
Well,
give
and that's
into
something,
it, like to be a
the
whole complete
puritanical,
person.
yeah, right. That's the puritanical ideal too, as the shadow is bad, right? Everything out in the
Mhm.
forest is evil. Satan lives out there, witches live out there, bad things, right, will happen to you out there. And we've become so scared of our shadow, literally, right, in a depth psychological
Mhm.
way, as well as a physical way almost. And if Hades represents that, if Hades represents our shadow, then yeah, it's easy to equate him with the Christian version of Satan or the devil.
Mhm.
And I think too a lot of that with the letters, right, in Acts and in those books, a lot of times the word Hades was interchangeably used for the
For
idea of
hell.
hell. Yeah,
Right.
and so that obviously is, I mean, that's some pretty good pathos happening there, some convincing. So
Hmm.
gotta
I
give
like to
the
think
writer
of
some
the
rhetorical. I give him an A.
I like to think of the shadow self as like a pipe or like a garbage disposal, right?
Mm,
If you keep
okay.
shoving stuff into it
Yeah.
without addressing it or recognizing it or fixing it, there's going to be a big old clog. And eventually you're not going to have any control over it. And all that muck is going to come shooting out at you.
Yeah,
And you're
pretty
going to be
much.
covered in it.
Yep.
Maybe a clogged toilet where you're like putting all your shit into, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to control it. Um,
I
and,
was
and
thinking of the
that's
shit
kind of
demon
part
in
of
Dogma.
Hot Dog was the best movie ever.
That's the best movie. Oh
Um,
god.
But that's the thing about the shadow. Like Robert Bly calls the shadow the long black bag we drag behind
Yeah.
us.
Mm-hmm.
Like the weight of the world on Atlas's shoulders. We all have all of these things about us that we're told are bad or unacceptable in polite society, from
Mm-hmm.
things as simple as like picking our nose, right? We
Mm-hmm.
do it like secretly,
Mm-hmm.
or we try to pretend like we're just scratching, or like I have a nose ring, so that's always a really good excuse. Ooh, I just have
Oh
to
yeah.
fix my nose ring.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But we're told that that's bad,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
um and we could kind of think of this like this bag or this garbage disposal or wherever we're shoving all our gross bad shit into, like
Mm-hmm.
if we just go through it, it's kind of like that hellacious boat ride in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
right?
Really.
And we
That's
we
not
could
a
get
bad
lost in it, and we
comparison.
could get scared by it, because it's all of these things, like intrusive thoughts. Those are part
Mm-hmm.
of our shadow too, that pop into our head that we would never
Mm-hmm.
act on, that we have no control over, but they come from somewhere like deep buried within our psyche.
Yeah.
um so yeah, picking your nose, crying in public,
Mm-hmm.
being needy, like any of these things. And people's shadows, everyone's shadow is unique. So there's going to be a lot
Sure.
of overlap if you grew up in the same society and have like similar backgrounds, but everybody's going to have a different shadow. And unless you embrace it and recognize it and name it, then it's going to come out
Mm-hmm.
like in Victorian literature when nobody was allowed to talk about sex, and it's like seeping out of every pore.
Yes, everywhere. Um,
Or like the classic Victorian novel, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
yeah.
literally about somebody who needs to embrace their shadow,
Yeah.
who,
It
I mean,
divests into this
but
other
who was the
persona.
true character,
I
and who
think
was the shadow?
Mr. Jekyll or Dr. Hyde would have been the fully integrated person.
Ooh, okay, okay. But it's like all of us, like when we get drunk, maybe we'll say things that we wouldn't say normally, and
I
we might
never
be a
do
little
that.
bit embarrassed about it.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I've never been
Um,
embarrassed about anything I've
no,
said drunk.
no, me either. Um, never. I've never been drunk. I don't know what you're talking about. Um,
Fair enough.
as she remembers grad school. Um,
I'm not familiar with what you're saying.
oh, right. Okay, good. What I was going to say is shadow projections, right?
Mm,
This has been particularly humbling for me. And I share this with my students every year too. And we talk about all of these things about ourselves we don't understand. And
mhm,
we project them onto other people. And I said, one of the most humbling experiences you can have is look at a person who just irritates you for no reason. I mean, like no reason at all. Like you don't even know why, but you're looking at them and like, they eat those crackers weird. Like I hate them. And you don't even know why, or they're clicking in those shoes. Like you don't even know. That's because they exude something that you don't like about yourself, but you're
mm.
projecting that shadow side of yourself onto this person. And it'll make you sit in the shower listening to like really sad music for an hour or two. You're just like, what am I, where am I going with my life? But we have to learn to, we have
I'm
to
just
learn
picturing
to be able to accept that.
all by myself, just
Right?
sobbing in the shower, sitting down,
Sobbing. Yeah. I was
letting the
thinking like
water
21 Pilots
water
or
be clean.
something, but sure, that song works too.
Wait, who's the Gen Xer here?
I know. It's all the high schoolers I hang around all the time. That sounds really creepy.
That
I mean, as a
sounds
high
so
school
bad. Yeah,
teacher,
that was horrifying.
that was horrifying. Ah,
Oh no.
no.
Hello, fellow
Anyway,
kids.
speaking, yes, hello, fellow kids. Um,
Um,
but yeah, the shadow
so yeah,
idea, getting back
I
to
tend to
Hades and the
think though,
shadow.
like if I meet somebody and immediately I just don't like their energy, from my
Mm-hmm.
anthropological background, I think, well, maybe our pheromones just aren't compatible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Subconsciously, I'm smelling something on them that is not compatible with something about my own biology, and it's not going to
Oh,
work.
yeah, sure.
Or in a woo woo sense, I think, well, maybe we were enemies in a past life. And maybe we have some sort of beef that I just don't even know about, but like it's on an energetic level.
Yeah, it's possible. Um,
But it's more likely just shadow projection.
shadow projection. Joseph Campbell had the best breakup line ever, when he was talking about dating. And, it can work the opposite way too, right? Your shadow projects something positive that you're attracted to, because it makes you feel safe or at
That you like
home or
wish you could
wanted.
be.
Well, I mean, I was thinking like in a partner. So yeah, maybe, but also
Yeah,
sexually,
like
there's
opposites
something.
attract, right? Like
Yeah,
I wish I
yeah,
was that confident or outgoing or
yeah, absolutely.
had that
Or
sense of
it could
humor
be a
or
physical
something.
feature. It could be anything that you just
Mm,
recognize, um, in your subconscious without consciously knowing it, that you're attracted to that. And you begin to kind of initiate a relationship with that person because you're attracted to that. And then, of course, as you go on and you start getting to know them better, you realize maybe they're not quite as compatible as you thought. And because you projected your shadow onto this person. And so when it comes time to break up, his nerdiest breakup line ever was, I'm going to take back my shadow for reprojection. And it's so great.
well
Can you
then,
imagine saying that to somebody? Like I
I
would break
could.
up with,
I
I would
would.
break up with them. Yeah, I just would
I
be
would.
like, yeah, please don't ever talk
Um,
to me again.
I was thinking on an anthropological level about being attracted to people who have characteristics that you envy or wish to embody or something like that, then
Sure.
anthropologically speaking, right, you would be attracted to them to give those qualities to your offspring.
Right. Hmm. Yeah. And I think that also works on a psychological level too.
Mm-hmm.
For like, especially if you're bringing in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
safety or the ability to reason, anything like that. You're looking for that safe environment. The safest place we've ever known, the majority of us, was the mother's womb, right? We didn't need anything, most of us. We were fed, we were warm, we never really had to go to the bathroom, all this fun stuff. And then we're shoved out
If
into
only
this
life
cold,
could
cruel
always be
world.
like that.
Well, and I feel like in the depth psychological world, that's kind of what individuate, like understanding that we cannot have that, but like these shadow projections, um psychological need for those things, we're constantly searching for that feeling of safety again, um which is great, but then to also understand that those things probably aren't going to happen the way that they used to happen. That's the process of individuation. And next week we're going to talk about the hero's journey, and that's definitely what the hero's journey is all about, is that individuation process and realizing how to be your own hero.
That you could never
So
truly go home again. That even
yeah,
if you return to the place, you're not the same. Your home isn't the same. It's never going to be the same.
yeah,
And now I'm wondering, okay, like obviously Demeter like has that meter part of her name,
right.
right? The mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so was Persephone's abduction by Hades. Okay, the earth splits and cracks open and
Mm-hmm.
Persephone gets taken by Hades, but what if she's just in the womb and everything's perfect and like the cervix is cracking wide open and the doctor is Hades pulling
Her out
pulling them from the warmth into
from the
the
mother,
darkness.
yeah, into the darkness. That's a really good analogy. Yeah.
I don't love it because it also
Well,
makes me think of like all of the issues around obstetric violence and doctors ripping things open and sticking their hands where they shouldn't go without consent
yeah.
and taking the
Um,
child from the mother.
yeah. There isn't you could associate this myth with that in a very dark way. Absolutely, you could. I mean, look what happened with Megan, my daughter, right? When we were trying to deliver her, and that just wasn't happening. And so it was out of my control. And the doctors, made some decisions that resulted in her having a brain bleed. And it just wasn't good. So yeah, I can see that lack of agency for Persephone alone. which is why I love so much that I like to think that she takes the pomegranate seeds for herself, because she regains that agency, just like her mom regains the agency when she bathes in the stream. And there might be something to that mother-daughter cycle with, even within the triple goddess, of going through this life of being the maiden to the matron to the crone, but also having those circles within each of those cycles and reclaiming who you are before you can carry that on to the next phase. So I really like that. That comforts me.
And we also have to consider too that in modern times we have this really linear view of time and history,
Yeah.
as opposed to this more cyclical view that a lot of other cultures that came before us had.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I mean, we still even like have a little bit of this in our language, right? Like our seasons turn as the earth turns, and we like return.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now
The
I'm
turning.
thinking of, who is it? The zombies. To everything turn. Oh, is it the turtles?
Is it the
Turn,
turtles?
turn. There is a season.
Yeah. Is
That
it the
song
turtles?
always reminds me of Demeter,
I can
because
see
it's
that.
like about harvesting. The
Mm-hmm.
birds.
The birds.
It's the
Yeah.
birds.
The birds. Yeah.
All these random 60s bands. I can't keep track.
It's not the Grateful Dead.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, gosh, there's just so many ways to go about this myth, and every time I talk about it, like it creates some sort of new understanding or analysis or thought pattern for
Honestly,
me.
this is one of them that can be looked at in so many different ways. And I know when I was in my 20s, I would have understood this myth in a completely different way than I understand it as a 50-year-old, right? And I'm sure I'll understand it in a completely different way if I ever see 70 or 80. It would be interesting to see how that works. Um, and having that relationship, like as a mother, right, and having that desire to protect your child and to pass on things, and then when you're a maiden yourself and you don't have that connection, and then you look at the mother as sort of an oppressive agent, right, instead of a guardian or whatever. And it's complicated. You can't always say that it is all this or all that, right? There's nuances in there, but this myth is very much still alive, which I love. So, and I think anytime you mention, hey, what's your favorite myth? 9 times out of 10, this is the one that gets chosen.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember the first place that I was when I heard this story,
Mm-hmm.
in 6th grade in
Oh,
Miss
wow.
Anderson's class at, well, Miss Johnson then. She turned into Mrs. Anderson later.
Shout out to Mrs. Johnson.
Yeah, shout out to Miss Johnson at First Lutheran in Torrance, California. Yeah, I was in 6th grade. I thought it was the best story I'd ever heard. And one of our assignments in class was to like do a sketch, like put on a little play of a myth. And so I obviously chose this one. And it's been my favorite ever since. And of course, the first time I heard it as a 6th grader, what was I, 11 years old? Like all it was a really cool story about how the seasons change.
Sure.
And I thought that was so interesting and so fun. And now I've started a little tradition with my daughter, where we pluck a pomegranate and and count out the seeds together,
That's so cool.
in celebration of Persephone,
I love that.
Which is really, really fun.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was thinking about American gods as you were speaking, because is it Neil Gaiman or Gaiman?
Gaiman, I think.
Okay. I'm so bad at that. Neil Gaiman, like he has this whole thing about the old gods and how people aren't saying their names anymore, and it's not giving
Yeah.
them power,
Hmm.
and how people need to start worshiping them again in order to like give
Yeah.
them full vitality or something along those lines. And there's
Hmm.
that idea in so many cultures as well, where the relationship with death and your ancestors, as long as their names are being spoken, they're still alive, or they're
Hmm.
still with you in some capacity. And it isn't until their name stops being spoken that they kind of join just the bigger energy of the
Hmm.
universe. Um,
Yeah. I was reading something on that today, actually. I don't know if it was Hatab or Heidegger. It's one of the H's in the philosophy world, um,
yeah.
where they were talking about languages. Uh, an oral language is where the stories live, and once things are written down, they kind of die because they become fixated.
Mhm.
And there's no, like, once you write it down, that's it.
Right.
And great, yes, we can revise and all that, but in that moment, that's all that exists. But in the spoken language, when we speak their names, when we say their stories, they live on, right? And same like in Harry Potter, right? When people say he who shall not be named, because they don't want to give him more power. It's speaking things is huge as far as that kind of belief system goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Words have power. And this is the thing with mythology too, right?
Absolutely.
Mythology as oral stories, it's like a game of telephone. The stories
Hmm.
change based on, and I know like I've beaten this dead horse, but it's just so important.
Yeah.
Mythology, the version of mythology you get depends on who's telling the story, who they're telling the
Hmm.
story to, and like what the cultural context is at the time. And that's why we have so many different versions of these stories,
Hmm.
because there were always so many different versions of this stories, and they all got written down by different people at different times. And so there's
Hmm.
not one right or wrong
Hmm.
version. It
Absolutely. Yeah.
it just speaks to the time, just like you retelling the Persephone and Demeter myth here, like
Bringing in a lot of modern imagery to it,
right,
right?
like
Yeah.
Persephone's texting Hades for a booty call, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
I'd
It
like to
doesn't
go on
need to be
record
an
that that was
official.
your, yeah.
That was mine. That was
That
mine.
was yours.
I'll own that. I'm proud of that actually.
Actually, you
Um,
should be proud of that. That was pretty good. Yeah.
but that's the thing. Like we tell these stories in ways that our audience will understand today, and that's the
Right.
beauty of telling them orally, is that we don't have to be stagnant. And that's the issue with so many mythologies that are written down in the past.
Hmm.
They were for a different audience. They were for a different time. They were for
Hmm.
completely different people that don't understand us and we don't understand them. And so then
Yeah.
we're stuck with these arbitrary rules
Hmm.
that are fixed, a snapshot of a moment in time, a literal piece of literary archaeology that gives us a window into another time, but isn't necessarily applicable to where we're standing now. And
See, this is why I
um,
like to be your friend, because you say things like literary archaeology, and then I just like I know her.
that's what I love about historical literature. It's an
Yeah,
artifact. It's an
absolutely. Yeah.
archaeological window into someone's mind in a different
Hmm.
time and place, and
Yeah,
it's so magical.
it is
Um,
magical.
And so like we have these little snippets, these little snapshots, but they're like artifacts. They're like fossils. They're a snapshot frozen in a moment in time. And talk about like never being able to go home again. Like humanity
Yeah.
isn't the same as it was,
No.
but there are pieces of us that are the same, right? These archetypes that come out
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
connect us to these stories, even though like to the bones of the stories, even though the flesh is a little bit different and hard to
Hmm.
recognize, the bones of these stories stay intact generation to generation, because we all have a parent. We can all relate to that, or most of us can relate to that feeling of separation, whether it's from our birth or from leaving home and
Hmm.
venturing into the unknown. um
Hmm.
I have a 2-year-old. That's all we listen to. um but yeah, like going off on your own or into an unknown situation or into an unsafe situation without a safety net or without a security net. Or
Yeah.
maybe you're going on your first date and it's the first time you're alone with somebody that you're attracted to and you have no chaperone and you don't know what to do. And now what? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's all of these moments of separation that we have in our lives that we don't need to be ancient Greek or ancient Roman to understand about this
Yeah,
story.
absolutely.
I mean,
And
I'm even thinking of like a Dixie Chick song. Like, gosh, I should just do like songs as ancient mythology.
you
I
should.
mean,
You do a whole course on that.
it would be there. There's a great Dixie Chick song called Ready to Run. And I feel
Yeah,
like it
that's
could
a
be like
great one.
Persephone's song.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's the
when my
archetypal
mama
daughter,
said
right?
I look good in white, I'm gonna be ready next time. Like just like
Mm-hmm.
breaking those confines of expectations in society. And Persephone
Yeah.
doesn't have to be the golden child. She could run straight into the darkness
That
and
was my anthem every
embody
time
that
I
and
left my
embrace it.
house. Cranked that up in my cassette player.
I do that too. That was such a good album.
It was.
Oh,
It's such a
sorry,
good
they go by
album.
the Chicks now.
Right. Yes. No more Dixie, which is good.
Mhm. Good for them.
Yeah. And what's interesting too about like the Greek stories is one of the reasons there are so many different versions of Persephone story or Nike story or Demeter or any of them, is because of the city states, right? We think of the Greeks as the Greeks, and they weren't the Greeks. We very mistakenly say the Greeks, and what we're really talking about when we say the Greeks, we're talking about 5th century Athenians or maybe 5th century Spartans, but that's it. And everyone else was sort of like their own country. They had their own kings, right? And they
I'm
were
going to
they
argue
were
that the
their own.
Spartans would not have considered themselves Greek.
No, I think you're right
We
about that.
do, right?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I meant. But it's that whole idea of they had their own stories, and then of course as um they became a more unified country, they had to figure out how to incorporate all of these stories, which were not just stories, right, to them, and they had to figure out how to live, and then all these religious festivals and things. So things started becoming a little messy. And then we get, because that was Hesiod, right, who wrote all those down. And then when we get to Ovid or Ovid, however you want to say it, he takes all of those stories and turns them into the Roman history, right? Starting with Remus and Romulus creating Rome, and then he just sort of borrows all of the stories and says this is how Rome was built. This is why Rome is great, because we have all these stories. And interestingly, even though we call them Greek myths, most of the way that we recite them today are the Roman versions.
The Roman versions. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was what was popularized. So but yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
So
interesting.
if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, that story sounds really familiar, but I thought their names were Ceres and Corey. Well, you're right,
That's why.
because
Yep.
Persephone's Roman name is Corey, and we already went over that Demeter is
Mm-hmm.
Ceres in Roman. But
Mm-hmm.
Corey,
Corey.
Kore,
Yeah. Or
means
two R's, I thought.
maiden.
Right. Is it one R?
I
I
think
don't
it's just
use
one R.
yeah, I use their Greek
I
names most
never
of the
use
time.
the Roman versions of the names. I'm like I know I just said that mythology is fluid and changing and there's no right or wrong way, but I'm like
Well,
this
we have
weird
habit.
purist, like the Greek stories were first and these were their names. And like we have Latin and Roman imperialism that takes over so much of our culture. I'm like,
I
no.
am running into that with my dissertation so much, because Castor and Pollux are their Roman names, right? And it's Castor and Polydeuces in Greek. And so I'm talking about Castor and Pollux, and I say their dad Zeus, and my dissertation chair is like, no, Jupiter. If you're going to use Roman names, use Roman names. I'm like, but I don't like Jupiter. His name is Zeus. Like, I don't like that. I don't want it, but I don't want to have to
Jupiter
say
or
Polydeuces.
Jove
Yeah,
or
like,
Jude. Can we call him Jude at this point? Like, what is happening?
hey Jude. Just something. Gosh, it's so annoying. But yeah, I mean, they're all the same people. They're just the same stories. It's the same characters. It's the same
Right.
myth, the energies, whatever you want to call them, right? It's all the same.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah. It
So,
just and I've got another bone to pick with the Romans, right? They
uh-oh,
only changed some of the names. They didn't change all of the names. So
right? Hmm.
everybody's just confused.
Yeah, but think about being part of that community too. Is like all of the subtext and the gradual shifts and changes would have been so normal, no one would have even felt them. Like our
Mm.
language, the way it moves and changes today, we barely notice it. Um, and oh, good. What'd you find?
Can you see it?
Yeah. What is it? I have to do my old way of looking at things.
It's Greek mythology and Roman mythology. It's a real
Oh my
cat
gosh, I
versus a
love it.
terrible
Yeah.
cake that looks like a
Okay, I see
weird
it.
cat.
That's awesome.
I love
I
this meme. I
mean,
send it to my students all the time.
yeah,
It's
that's
like,
pretty good. Yeah,
good try.
I have to do
Good
that.
try,
I have
Romans.
to get my bifocals set on it so I could read the fine print.
I know. I had to like, am I the crone now? That happened really
No,
fast.
no. You've got some years left.
I just became a mother.
Yeah, so you're still in the matron. I'm entering crone phase, and I mean I'm accepting it, but yeah, night cream is freaking expensive, dude.
Night cream?
Yeah, eye cream, night cream, all of it. Just it's all expensive. Yeah.
I know. I should probably start having some sort of skincare regimen. But who cares? Skincare regimens are sold to us by the patriarchy to
They
convince us that
are.
old crones should look younger, like maidens. Well, guess what, world? I'm not a maiden
World.
anymore, and I'm
No,
never going to be again.
no.
And no amount of eye creams or push up bras or nips and tucks and Botox are going to change that. So I'm going to
Eat
embrace
those
it.
pomegranate seeds, girl.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, we do it every Easter. That's our welcoming the spring tradition, is honoring Persephone.
That's so great. I love that so much.
And my child doesn't understand it now, but hopefully
She
she
will.
will soon.
She will soon. Yeah. She was cute last year with saying Persephone. So cute.
I sent a little video out of her plucking pomegranate seeds. Welcome, Persephone.
She's 2. So so cute.
So cute. Okay, well, before this turns
But
into a conversation about how cute my child is,
it's,
which I could talk all night on,
we could do
obviously.
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, thank you so much for coming on today and talking
Oh,
about this. We might need to do additional parts of this Demeter and
sure.
Persephone myth because there's so much more we could talk about. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, even though we've been officially live
Yeah.
talking about it for like almost an hour.
Yeah. No,
Talking
this
about
is
a little
such a
more
rich
before that.
story. Before we were live, we were pre-live. Pre-live.
Pre-live.
Yeah. But no,
And
for
now
sure we can
darkness has
definitely.
fallen, and I still don't know where my glasses are.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any tips, come at me and let me know. Who can I pray to? Who can I make an offering to? If I have to go out and buy cream, guess what? I don't have glasses to drive right now. I'm gonna have to wait until the morning to put my prescription sunnies on. So
Hephaestus, god of technology. So gotta get on that.
Hephaestus is god of technology.
Yeah.
I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah. Hephaestus, he's the one that makes all the good stuff. That's why he's married to Aphrodite, right? That whole um
I know, but I know he's like the blacksmith, right? So
yeah,
is that
yeah.
considered technology of the day?
Yeah. And then Hermes
Okay.
too was like he's a god of technology as well.
Well,
But in a different
And Hermes can cross boundaries. So
yes.
if
Hmm.
these glasses disappeared into the fairy world or another
And it
realm, I
was
don't.
like right around 7, which is the in between time. So like it wasn't midnight, but like 7 is in between hours.
Okay.
So
It was like
you know,
exactly at 7,
I know I was there.
6:55.
I know you'll
God
find
bless
them.
America.
It'll be good. Yeah.
Will. I sure will. Well,
Join us
thank
next
you,
week when we talk
everybody.
about Randall's glasses.
I'm so sorry. Oh gosh. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Next week, Deb is going to talk about the hero's journey. And
Yay.
I think we're going to do something fun, like talk about the hero's journey of Harry Potter,
Sure, we can
perhaps.
use Harry Potter. We can use
We can use
any
Harry
movie you want.
Potter. Yeah. Pick a
Any movie
movie.
you want.
Send us a
Pick a movie.
suggestion.
Yeah,
We'll see if we can
absolutely.
make it work with the hero's journey. And then the following week, we're going to be doing the heroine's journey. I feel
Yes.
like I don't want to say heroine. Like that's kind of how it's
Heroine.
pronounced, but I like don't want to say that.
That is also a journey. Different kind. Just saying.
A great
Um,
song by the Velvet Underground as well. That song is a musical journey. Check that out.
it is a journey, sure. And I'll probably be talking a little bit more about Hunger Games with that one because of Katniss. But and there's a Diana connection there too. So, or Artemis, if you want to talk about that. So, we'll go in there.
We're going there. All right.
Yep.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you. This was fun.